in 3 to 4 weeks. President Moon and Japanese Prime Minister Abe will hold separate talks after their trilateral meeting with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang.
Following the trilateral meeting, President Moon and Japanese Prime Minister Abe will hold a separate bilateral summit and a luncheon meeting to exchange ideas on ways to build a future-oriented South Korea-Japan relationship and cooperation for complete denuclearization and lasting peace on the Korean peninsula.
The trilateral summit next week in Tokyo will serve as a key venue for the leaders of China and Japan to become up to date on the latest advancements from the Inter-Korean summit. Now, will that be enough to quell the two countries' fears of being sidelined in this entire process? The rapid warm-up of ties between the two Koreas and the possible denuclearization? Well, that we'll find out come May 9th when the three leaders come face-to-face for the very first time in over 6.5 years. Moon Gon-young, Arirang News, the Blue House.
President Moon Jae-in met this morning with his Turkish counterpart, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who's on a state visit to South Korea. It's the first meeting between the leaders of the two countries since Seoul and Ankara established a strategic partnership in 2012. After a welcoming ceremony, the two leaders held a summit at the Blue House, highly evaluating their 61 years of bilateral cooperation and their long-standing friendship, and also the recent Inter-Korean summit. Turkey contributed the second highest number of Allied troops during the Korean War. Seoul also helped Turkey following the 1999 earthquake in Istanbul. The leaders also witnessed the signing of MOUs in sectors including education as well as ICT. A state banquet in honor of President Erdogan will be held this evening. Meanwhile, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is set to visit North Korea for 2 days starting Wednesday. It's the first visit to Pyongyang by a Chinese foreign minister in 11 years. Wang and his North Korean counterpart Lee Yong-ho will discuss last week's Inter-Korean summit and Chinese President Xi Jinping's proposed visit to Pyongyang. Wang is also expected to meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un during his visit. There's wide speculation that Wang will express China's willingness to hold four-way talks with the two Koreas and the U.S. amid Chinese concerns that Beijing is being bypassed on the issue. The Panmunjom Declaration, agreed at the Inter-Korean summit, includes plans to hold multi-party talks. South Korea insists the Panmunjom Declaration is different from previous Inter-Korean agreements in that it has a higher possibility of being carried out properly. Unification Minister Cho Myung-kyun told reporters on Wednesday that the different leadership and the willingness of related parties gives the agreement a higher chance of success. He said conditions are now in place for a virtuous cycle where the denuclearization process and an improvement in inter-Korean relations can both move forward. Cho added while inter-Korean economic cooperation will proceed after there's progress on denuclearization, the projects won't be restricted to the two Koreas but will involve the international community. U.S. President Donald Trump says the location and date of his historic summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un should be announced this week. Speaking to reporters at the White House on Tuesday, Trump said officials are setting up meetings, and he believes the announcement on the location and date will be made within the next couple of days. Lee Seung-jae has more.
When and where? Those are the big questions surrounding President Trump's historic summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. According to Trump, the answer to both will come soon.
We're setting up meetings right now, and I think it's probably going to be announced over the next couple of days, location and date.
This comes after the U.S. leader said the DMZ dividing the two Koreas is being considered as a potential location, as it's rich with diplomatic history and symbolism, with President Trump tweeting that it's a more representative, important, and lasting site than any other. A summit at Panmunjom could also give the Moon Jae-in administration more leverage over the agenda and outcome, given the geography, as South Korea and the U.S. are key allies with more than 28,000 American troops stationed on the peninsula. With President Trump playing a key part in bringing North Korea to the table, South Korean President Moon Jae-in previously mentioned that the U.S. leader should receive the Nobel Peace Prize, a suggestion Trump felt was very generous.
Nobel Peace Prize? Yes, sir. Well, I just think that President Moon was very nice when he suggested it. I want to get peace. The main thing, we want to get peace. That was a big problem, and I think it's going to work out well. We'll see.
With the historic Washington-Pyongyang summit set for some time in the next 3 to 4 weeks, South Korea and the rest of the world wait with bated breath for all-important date and location. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The Blue House says U.S. forces need to stay in South Korea even if a peace treaty is eventually signed. The spokesman for the Blue House was responding this morning to comments by President Moon's senior diplomatic advisor, Moon Jae-in, who said Tuesday that the presence of U.S. troops would no longer be justified if the Korean War was formally ended. Take a listen.
President Moon said U.S. forces in Korea is a matter concerning the South Korea-U.S. alliance. It has nothing to do with the signing of a peace treaty.
The Blue House also confirmed Presidential Chief of Staff Im Jong-seok called the special advisor, asking him to avoid remarks that could confuse the public about the president's position. A high-ranking Blue House official who did not want to be named asserted that the U.S. forces' role as a mediator between nearby powers like China and Japan is critical. The same official also said Pyongyang was not among the proposed North Korea-U.S. summit sites that President Moon and President Trump discussed on Saturday. An activist hedge fund based in the United States, Elliott Management, is taking legal action against the South Korean government. The claim concerns a merger between two affiliates of Samsung Group a few years ago, a deal that figured into the scandals that brought down former President Park Geun-hye. Elliott Management opposed the merger at the time and says the government unlawfully used its influence to push the deal through. Won Jang-hwan reports.
U.S. hedge fund Elliott Management is seeking compensation from South Korea over claims that the former administration intervened in the merger of two Samsung units in 2015. The New York-based hedge fund handed a notice of intent to South Korea's Justice Ministry through the Investor State Dispute Settlement System on Tuesday. In 2015, Elliott filed for an injunction against the merger between Samsung C&T and Jeil Industries, claiming the merger was designed to cement a power transfer to Samsung Group's heir apparent Lee Jae-yong. When the U.S. hedge fund, which owned about 7% of Samsung C&T at the time, lost the vote on the merger, it claimed Samsung has clinched support from the government-run National Pension Service. Elliott claims it incurred significant damages as a result of the merger. Last month, Elliott demanded another South Korean conglomerate, Hyundai Motor Group, to change its management structure. The hedge fund is pushing for Hyundai to adopt a more efficient holding company structure by merging Hyundai Motor and Hyundai Mobis into one company. Hyundai Motor Group said it will continue to communicate with its shareholders, including Elliott, about how it will simplify its governance structure through business spin-offs and mergers. As foreign investors are expected to increase their shares in Korean companies, they are likely to further scrutinize those companies' management structure. Won Jong-hwan, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines for this hour.
Last Friday, the two Koreas pledged to work toward complete denuclearization and boost inter-Korean relations to bring peace to the Korean peninsula. Since then, South and North Korea have been quick to take down their propaganda-blasting loudspeakers, while the North said that it's resetting its clocks to match Seoul's time zone. Now, there's cautious optimism over the positive developments that we've been seeing with North Korea, and eyes are now on how these developments will lead to a successful summit between North Korea and the U.S. To talk to us more about this, Dr. Kim Choongsoo, Research Fellow Emeritus of the Korea Institute for Defense Analysis, joins us in the studio today. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, and great to be here.
All right, so we're seeing North Korea moving rather quickly in regards to what the two Koreas have agreed on during last week's summit. So what can we make of this?
I think this time North Korea really means the business, because they're really willing to speed up the process toward the denuclearization and also building another new peace regime on the peninsula, which has been our long-term goals for the last 45 years, because this is what we've been discussing for the last 45 years. And finally, it's all assembled together as one great piece, so that we could freely discuss among North and South Korea, also under maybe from between China and Japan and the United States and the United Nations. because this is a very historic moment that we're going coming to the final end to the long forgotten war of the Korean War, and finally building a new real peace regime on the peninsula, finally. So this has significance, political significance, diplomatic significance, but also historically very important significance.
I mean, we're definitely seeing some rapid developments here in regards to North Korea. Do you think this is Kim Jong-un's style of doing things, perhaps? Because he is kind of considered as a different person compared to his father and his grandfather.
That's right. He's a different kind of North Korean, he's a new young generation, unlike his grandfather and his father, who has never been kind of exposed to foreign life, studying, even though they were raised in Russia, where they traveled a lot to China and many other places. But Kim Jong-un is quite different. And I think he has learned a lot of lessons from his grandfather and father. That's why, even though he didn't admit that, but North Korea has been a very backward country. And particularly South Korea, the gap between the two Koreas has been widened a lot. And I think he believed there is no future hope if he continues on his line of policy towards South Korea, just like his father and grandfather. So I think this is a very great kind of decision by the North Korean leadership that finally changes course, but to get the maximum benefits out of this. This is a very clever decision-making process. And I think this is his typical personal style. Maybe he's much more broad-minded, he's very kind of honest. And I think this is pave a good kind of road for another successful meeting with Mr. Trump, and also other trilateral and many other conferences at the worldwide set. So I think he's very proud, and I really hope he could continue on this kind of personality type of politics, because he will get a lot of credits, not only from the South Korean, but also from United States, and increasing from the Chinese as well. So I think he'll definitely stick to his personality, because so far it has proven so successful, much better than we expected.
Right. I mean, it's definitely something that we did not expect to come out of North Korea, what we have seen recently coming up from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. But we also heard earlier in our newscast that President Moon will be visiting Tokyo next week to hold trilateral summit with China and Japan. What can we expect from this? Because
China and North Korea, they are also very important stakeholders in this part of the world. We are 3 Asian countries, and they are heavily responsible for the division of our peninsula for the last 50, 60 years. And maybe they have also high stakes in the future of the 2 Koreas, where we're heading for, what kind of relations we will have toward the United States and Russia and China as well. So Tokyo and Beijing will definitely want to involved in this long process before they are too late. So that's why they're looking for this kind of very important moment to get in before we are heading to another very important meeting with Washington, Kim and Trump. So definitely he wants another meeting, talking to each other, 3 Asian leaders, even though Mr. Xi will not make it this time. But anyway, these 3 Asian countries meeting will be very important in paving a way for successful meetings and summit meetings elsewhere throughout the year.
Right. It's also good news for China and Japan, because those are the countries that were very eager to avoid the so-called China and Japan passing.
That's right. I think they don't want to be being left out, because they have so many other stakes. For China, for example, they are really interested in whether the positions and the roles and mission of the USFK, for example. And for Japan, the abduction issues are very important, nuclear issue, and also the missile issues, because North Korea has a kind of nodal missiles that really can target any targets in Japan, particularly USFJ. So Japan has its own reasons why they want to get involved. It's quite different from Chinese or the American, but also China and Japan, they really have their own problems, and they want to be taken care of at the 3 trilateral meetings in Tokyo.
And also on Tuesday, President Moon asked the UN for help in verifying the dismantlement of North Korea's Punggye nuclear site. This follows North Korea saying that it would allow foreign experts and also journalists to actually witness the dismantling of its nuclear site. So what can we make of this?
I think this is also a very wonderful decision by the North Korean leadership, because every international world really wants to see the closing of this facility. So instead of just let them go, They want to invite all the inspectors, for example, like IAEA, Korean American, even Chinese. So they get the 100% assurance from the international community. They really destroyed and closed this kind of nuclear test sites, in addition to probably potentially some other facilities as well. So this is a very good start so that they can really convince us they really mean to dismantle and freeze and finally denuclearize all these nukes and other CBMs as well. So this is a kind of, for the North Korean leadership, this is a kind of preemptive attack that we are this much open-minded, we really mean business, and just come and trust us, and we'll show whatever you want us to do.
Right, and this especially ahead of Trump or Kim Trump
That's
summit.
right. It's paving a very favorable conditions for the upcoming meeting with Trump.
Now, looking at the Panmunjom Declaration that came out from the summit, what are some of the issues or projects that the two sides should assess or get a work on immediately? And what are some of the things that the two Koreas could get a work on in the long-term goals?
Oh, you know, we have a lot of, short-term and long-term goals and meetings, and this is why Blue House has decided that they're going to set up a kind of free kind of a team to facilitate, all the process, what kind of problems we should tackle and what kind of remedies and recommendations we should come up with. So this is a kind of feasibility test. In my institution, before we have any kind of very important projects, we conduct some feasibility tests. So this is another way of doing a kind of feasibility test. So we're going to have this list of short-term, long-term projects that will be very important to both North and South Korea. But before launching that kind of programs, what would be the expected outcomes, results of these programs, so that we can have some assurance before we get started. So this is a very important, very kind of security concerns, safety concern measures to work previously before launching officially these programs and agreements with North Korea.
All very important because we do not want to repeat the mistakes of the past.
Definitely.
So, South Korea, meanwhile, said today that the issue of U.S. troops stationed here in the South is unrelated to a peace treaty with North Korea. So, and that U.S. forces are to stay even if a peace treaty is reached with North Korea in the near future.
Yeah, this is a very important issue. I was reading a newspaper that Mr. Moon Jung-in, Professor Moon Jung-in made a kind of remark that it will be very difficult to justify the continued U.S. military presence if there is a peace treaty replacing the armistice agreement. That's okay. I understand what he was trying to say. But remember, the USFK has been here on a totally different legal basis, which is MDT, Mutual Defense Treaty. This is actually, Chinese and North Korean have claimed very similar claim, like Mr. Moon Jae-in, Mr. Moon Jae-in, I'm sorry, that by the time we're going to replace these armistice agreements with a new peace treaty, there will be less and less kind of justification for the continued military presence by the U.S. troops here on the peninsula. But I think this is quite different. Because if we have a new peace regime on the peninsula, you do probably North Korea, who wants a kind of continued U.S. military presence on the Korean peninsula, hopefully in the lower part of the peninsula. Maybe you never know. Maybe somewhere close to Pyongyang as a kind of guarantee for their own region survivability. So this is, for the North Korean leadership, this is another very important sign that before we are going totally denuclearized, we want some assurance. That is military presence, maybe at the U.S. Embassy in Pyongyang, for example. And there is a kind of low level of military inspectors. So whenever there is a kind of, so this is a total different missions and roles by the future USFK. And this is something we have been working on. But I think new ministers, both United States and South Korea, will talk on this issue for the upcoming SCM later this year.
We're definitely going to see some further discussions on this matter. On the other hand, U.S. President Donald Trump mentioned the truce village of Panmunjom as a potential summit venue for him and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in the coming weeks. Now, taking into account that a third country was actually considered as a possible summit venue, what could have led to a sudden change in mind?
I think he was pretty much, Mr. Trump was impressed by the perfect performance by the two leaders, North and South Korea, last week. And the good media facility, for example, like a Kintex. And Kintex, as a matter of fact, have two big facilities. So if we have a kind of Trump-Kim meeting here in Seoul near Panmunjom, Kim is ideal location for media coverage worldwide. And also Remember, Mr. Trump made it very clear, I want to visit the JSA someday. And last time when he was here, because of the bad weather, he just visited, Fort Camp Freeze down in Pyeongtaek. So he's definitely want to go there this time because the coverage will be wonderful. You get as much limelight as possible. And we have the proven facilities in Kintex and Ilsan and Panmunjom.
Right.
So why not? He will be really remembered as a real hero for signing a kind of the ending the Korean War, the long forgotten war, finally. And he went to remember the very most important U.S. president in American history to finally put an end to the long forgotten, long lasting war over the last 65 years.
Right.
So why not?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mr. Trump was very impressed about
very
the
realistic,
Korean
that's
summit.
right.
So I think he thought it was a good idea probably to have his own summit there. But we'll see what comes out on that with the location and the date on the Trump-Kim summit. But what role could and should South Korean President Moon Jae-in play from here now, post-Inter-Korean summit?
I think that Mr. Moon Jae-in has a lot of things to do before we have a Trump summit meeting. I don't know whether sometime this month or early next month. But I think Mr. Moon Jae-in will pave a kind of very good, favorable conditions for a successful meeting between Kim and Trump, because the thing we have agreed at the Panmunjom Declaration is very partial in a sense when it comes to denuclearization of North Korea and Korean Peninsula, because it was used just complete denuclearization instead of CVID. I think it's quite intentional because everybody was looking for a kind of CVID of North Korean nuclear weapons. But what Mr. Moon did, it just forced part of the CVID, and he wants to leave it to Mr. Trump to do it, and he wants to sign a CVID. And during this, probably North Korean relation will also be assured that both South Korea and the United States mean really business. They are willing to do some reciprocal ways to protect or safeguard its regime in Pyongyang. So this is a gradual reciprocal way of doing this. And I think Mr. Trump will get a tremendous good advice from the South Korean government, not only by the President Moon, but also senior cabinet members and also, Jong-in, a lot of high-ranking officials at Cheongwade. So we have a lot of them to play and roles to play leading up to the next summit meeting between Mr. Kim and Mr. Trump.
Right, all eyes are on the Korean Peninsula right now from all over the world. So I guess last but not least, what are your assessment of the Panmunjom Declaration as a national defense expert?
I think sure there are legitimate concerns because this is just a start of a long process. I don't think it will be covered by 1 or 2 years. For example, when it comes to denuclearization, it will take at least at the minimum of like 2 years. Some people say even 7 years or 10 years. But depending on the speed with which North Korea really allow the inspectors to come and inspect. But anyway, this is a good start. And it's just a declaration. You cannot put every details on one page. So which is a big good start. And all the remaining kind of processes and roadmaps will be filled out by the United States, South Korea, and also, you never know, the China as well. So this is a kind of flashback to what happened 65 years ago. So Chinese will be also involved, and the Japanese somehow will be involved. So this is a real great time for all countries, neighborhood, finally talking about the final end to the Korean War in a peaceful manner. So I think there's a lot of real roles we can play as a leader, in the driver's seat, but also we can play a very kind of supplementary role. For example, U.S. and Korea are the best allies in the world, and Chinese and also the Japanese wants to play in a kind of very important role. So there's no reason for us to reject them. Okay, you stay there and no play no more, but we want them to, we should encourage them to come and enjoy their potential contribution to another final peace regime on the peninsula, finally.
Let's hope to see more cooperation on that front. Thank you so much for your insight.
My pleasure. Okay.
And that does it for now, but stay tuned to Arirang for more news updates throughout the day. As always, thank you for watching and goodbye.
know Seoul? On the banks of the mighty Hangang River rises Asia's most dynamic city, a hub of technology, culture, and finance. Seoul, the heart of Korea. Hangang River, the main river that represents Korea, runs through the central part of the Korean peninsula and flows east to west. It originates from Taebaek, Gangwon-do province. Seoul, reduced to ashes during the Korean War, it is now home to the world-class brands Samsung and Hyundai. It's the pulsing metropolis where Psy sang his mega hit Gangnam Style. Seoul is the gateway to Asia, located between Beijing and Tokyo, and is a hub for trade and finance. Discover the subtle beauty and dazzling brilliance of Seoul, a 1,000-year-old capital which is on the cutting edge of technology, offers a glimpse of the future, and is a place of deep kindness.
Hanyang, the old capital of Korea, was what's considered modern-day Jongno, and the 5 palaces of the Joseon dynasty have stood the test of time until the present day. This is Changgyeongbung Palace, built in 1483. It is the 3rd palace to be built after Gyeongbokgung and Changdeokgung palaces. The palace was originally built to accommodate King Seongjong's grandmother, mother, and aunt. It was also the home to the queens and concubines of Joseon dynasty kings. Changgyeongbung Palace was a secondary compound located east of Gyeongbokgung Palace, the home of the king of Joseon. Unlike other palaces, the complex is rather simple.